Anupama, it's a great pleasure to have you here to discuss, this time, this book, and sort of where we are uh, in this moment, in a sense. And for me, this reading, I was reading through the essays in the book. I haven't seen the projects, but I have seen the essays. I've read all of them, and this book is actually it's a reflective piece of work. I found it very reflective. It's not only a reflection of some of the things that are happening around us in India, but also something that is reflective and makes us reflect on many things. The state of building, the state of architecture, of practice, of the profession, and as the world as and of the world as we know it, in a sense. And uh, we are coming out of this, sort of slowly coming out of this last 18 months of a very unique time where, you in Berlin, we in India are facing the same thing on almost on a daily basis. It's a really unique time where we're all sort of brought together so closely. And I wanted initially for us for you actually to reflect on this time. And I'm quoting Gautam Bhatia in his essay in the book. He says, "Invention comes at times of crisis, and the current situation is the loudest call for design to break fresh ground." Uh, that's one quote. And then there is a quote from Madhusudan Chalasani. He says, "It has become pretty clear to many of us architects in India that we were hardly sought after during the outbreak of COVID-19. Personally, I was certainly feeling inadequate and helpless in making any meaningful contribution. It struck me that what we do as architects greatly contributes to the misery around us." He says migrant workers, but perhaps what we really need is a period of non-doing, a period of complete disengagement from the idea of perpetual growth. Perhaps this implies that we actually do less work and seek a deeper meaning in whatever we do. My sort of point to you is, and I'd like to start with Shimul. Shimul, what is this time? How has this time shaped you? What is this time meant for you, and how has it shaped you as a person and also as a practice?
I mean, at the cost of being cliched, I think a lot of kind of introverted thinking, a lot of being able to really think about what I want, what the practice wants, what the world at large needs, all these questions. The initial months of fear, where I think all of us then, there was a huge meaning to some of the spiritual practices that we all have. Because I think fear can be so debilitating. And I mean, at one level, what's happened is a lot, which is that literally I have sold the offices that we were working out of. We used to have these offices in an industrial estate in Baikala. And I'm literally in the process of selling all of them. And I found a beautiful space in Kulaba, just behind the Taj, that we're going to be working out of. But more than that, the reason we could do all of this is because we discovered this work from home culture, which we've all thoroughly enjoyed. And we find it even more engaging at many levels. So, that's on a very kind of practice and personal front. But there was a lot of collaboration that went on, I feel, during the pandemic. There was an interesting collective that was put together by a few architects, where we decided to, collect funds for what the migrant workers were going through. And that led me to a whole course of discovery on on construction workers, and the fact that 70% of those migrant workers were from the construction industry, and how completely disorganized the construction industry is. There was a fair amount of studying of who these people are, how we can help them. And there was a finite amount of money that we were able to disseminate on that front. But I think at a kind of larger level, we took out the time to think about many different things. We all wrote to some extent. I wonder, the biggest hope, I think, at that larger level is that we don't go back to, the pandemic will slowly end, and the possibility of going back to where we were looms large. How do we retain that fervor, that spirit of collaboration and of, continuing to play activists to some extent?
Anupama?
Yeah, Khushru, first of all, let me just take a moment
Sure.
to thank Rajesh and you for putting this together, and for not only this, to Rajesh also for putting the whole book together, and the tremendous effort, especially to make unbuilt ideas manifest at least on paper, and because so much goes on in our heads, and it's a tremendous effort. And and then regarding how this time has been, as after I left Bombay, I'm really happy to have this kind of continuity to to my roots in a way, which is in Bombay. But also when I want to explain that for me, this period in some ways was not particular, because I have had a socially distanced life long ago out of very different personal circumstances that had prompted me to move out of Bombay when I didn't know where I was going to land, and whatever on the personal front made me take conscious decisions which ruled out certain things and made me focus on very, very inner and kind of let's say things that are invisible, and that's why I even in the first place engaged so much with my unbuilt ideas, because I actually gave much more value to what goes on the inside, and I see what happens on the outside as actually just a manifestation of what we really think. and either you manifest because you're in a big hurry and you don't have the time to think, but if you take the time and I spent about 10 years, I can say straight away, in quite solitary kind of situation. And those days there wasn't so much internet and everything. So I had already made peace or somehow effaced certain inner questions, that I didn't approach architecture as a profession with the kind of buzz and activity and the urgency, the sense of urgency that we seem to have, and the anxiety we seem to have to build our ideas at all cost. I was very, very careful at that time, just due to my personal journey, that I was more concerned with not building something that I didn't feel worked out enough. I never thought that kind of slow approach would add up to a thing even, I thought that I felt I'm like, and people used to say like, you're out of the rat race. And I used to feel I'm out of the race anyway, but I didn't. What is interesting for me, on the contrary, to notice now, when other people have also taken time to connect regardless of distances, we have got the tools which we didn't have at the time to be isolated, but yet remain connected. So for me, this time was not about isolating, it was about connecting. I have found that many of my other busy friends have also got liberated from a lot of they've just got more time. And then also I on my many of my quotes and all that you see around, one of them is that there is always time for what matters. I always believe that. I don't think time is a scarce resource. I believe that it is something we should happily be wanting to spend for what matters to us. And it's a way of engaging. Our time is a way, we are not victims of other people's busy plans, and therefore we are born in that, and so we don't have time. I never really subscribed to that. And I used to, even in Bombay, because I used to live in Santa Cruz area, Kalina, I used to think, okay, I'm going to make an imaginary city up to Bandra, and I'm going to walk up to there. I used to go walking also to work, and make it livable for me. So I spend a lot of hours, even however busy I got, I take a lot of time to do nothing on my daily level, like a day to day. And I think when the COVID thing hit us, I just felt like so many other people were facing those type of things, which somewhere I had normalized. And I actually enjoyed that they were making time to connect with me. So for me, it was really a very opposite thing. I felt like, like I'm talking to you. Like otherwise, if I wouldn't be in Bombay, we wouldn't organize this, So this, my whole, like the fact that others had time and used the tools. I was working with Zoom long ago, because I had to, because I have 2 children. I cannot limit everything to where I can go physically, but I was very hands-on and fully on the site, etc. So it's a very interesting thing that now I feel we are at a very good point, because people have undergone some amount of scrutiny, what is important and what is superfluous for everyone. And then people are making those decisions, how they take time to talk to each other and what they even talk. I'm enjoying this phase.
In one of your interviews, you mentioned, your practice is a synthesis. You look at practice as a synthesis of a three-legged stool, with research, practice, and teaching. And you say that your practice is research; it's a research-based practice, and your teaching is a practice-based teaching. So, in that sense, and for Shimul, I'll come to Shimul, but Shimul has a different sort of way of practicing. Initially, I'd like to ask you, Anupama, did you have a vision for a practice like this, or did it happen accidentally? How do these 3 things tie into your daily work and into your daily life?
Actually, I would say that I actually did envision a lot of things that happened. Although a lot of people think that I was, I read in the press on how my life or work is portrayed. It looks like people even ask me if I do even drawings for what those buildings are. And I'm like, no, you can't do these things without a lot of drawing. And similarly, what I'm telling you is that I don't think that accidentally, I personally, the kind of place I've landed in, nothing happened really by accident. It has been an incredible amount of determination and clinging to what I believe in times where everything is going to tell you otherwise. I literally would cling to my ideas, not like in a stubborn or, I don't have that kind of a willful way of clinging to my ideas, but I did feel that I really felt that I didn't want to only react to society and environment. I always felt like not like a victim of circumstances, because I faced a lot of things. And very early on, when I was very young, I realized if you're going to give the circumstances so much importance, they will just, you do nothing, And I used to tell myself that minimum I have to come up with a conviction to counter social norms and not to just submit here, submit there. Sorry, I have to just, I have to put this off. Sorry, I forgot. So, I mean, it was an enormous amount of determination. And there were, in fact, a lot of people misunderstand you when you're young. You have to pay a very big price if you think that you want to fight for a certain freedom, inner freedom, to not to just conform to norms and codes. You want to find out from first principles, right, as a young person. So I used to know that if I don't do that, then I will later not know, then the later part will be even harder for me. If I compromise now only, then, I won't do anything. And I didn't feel, so when I did all that, each time I could withstand. And it all comes down to being okay with if people misunderstand you somewhere. And you are walking this way and they tell you you're wrong because everyone's walking this way. And you say, no. I think I'm walking that way because I'm going from the river to the sea, but just because all the crowds are going there, I can't do that. So, but sticking to those type of decisions, and most of all, sticking very strongly to saying no when it didn't align with me. My portfolio is very much made up of things I said no to. So my unbuilt things which remain unbuilt are largely due to trying to get a coherence between my values, my ethics, and my, and toning down sometimes your ambition, sometimes your aspirations, but not, just being conscious and doing your best navigation day to day. So that's what actually happened. And so, yes, I think to do that much of technological research, to do a PhD and all those, you don't get without enormous sort of, thinking it out and sticking to it, and all the odds fighting against. You have to do your role in the family, your children, your debt, pay your bills, and all that.
It's clearly a
very intentional.
It's clearly a varied, long, hard road that you've taken. As a practitioner, as a researcher, as a teacher. It's actually doing all three of it. All three.
And let me just say one thing. I did not. It's strange. 30 years I have stuck it out, and many times people would ask me, it's all about sustainability and all that. They ask, is your practice sustainable? And I have one answer: no. If I think if my life as a whole is sustainable, yes, it's rewarding. I want to do only that. And if I'm today more aware and conscious, I would be ready to pay an even bigger price than I paid for sticking to what I believed in. But yeah, I mean, I just want to say that it has been, I will tell the younger people, don't give up, and you don't have a good reason just because others and majority around, it will torment you, I feel, much more. Like I have the torment of my ideas not being built, which is nothing compared to the fact that when I go to sleep, I feel a coherence between my brain and my feeling and my whatever I am doing with my life. It's worth it.
Shimul, in a different way, you have such a varied and synthetic practice as yourself, in terms of you've done adaptive reuse work, which is somewhere a crossover between architecture and interior design. You do architecture, large projects, diverse scales and types, and then you do interior design. So how do you bridge all these, how do you synthesize all this into one practice, into your way of working? Because there are very few practices that actually do both architecture and interior design at a competent level. Very often it's just one or the other. And what were some of the challenges that you face in this, or what has this journey been like, and how do you synthesize all of this into your work?
So, listening to Anupama, I wonder whether it's a gender thing or, but I resonate completely with her in feeling as if there was so much that I said no to. At a very early stage, no to residential interiors. So while we do other interiors, particularly of projects that we build, we just stopped doing residential interiors completely. We did one or two. So despite the fact that it's such an eclectic practice, and I think there are two questions inherent in this. The first of which is, how do you handle all these varied scales and these varied problems, and still kind of use design as a tool to solve them? And I think it's as simple as that. We see most things as we see design almost as a problem-solving approach. So whether it's the solving the problem of an interior project or an architectural project, the lens is similar. And I think it's the big one for us has always been that there are several levels of clients. There's a client who is actually paying the money. There's the client who is society and what we want to say what we want to kind of contribute societally through that project. And there's a bit of a client within us, which is, are we doing what we aspire towards? So I think when we kind of marry all these three is when we consider a project successful. So I don't know if that kind of answers the first level of your question, which is how do you handle multiple things? I think the other big one for me has always been a sheer enjoyment of working with people. For me, the most important project is the one where I feel as if I and the team resonates, collaborates with the people that we work with. So that perhaps is the most important piece in what we consider the success of the project. Because if we can resonate with the aspirations of that client and with our own aspirations, and we can communicate each other's aspirations effectively and kind of, collaborate, work together. And this word collaborate literally runs through everything we do, from clients to contractors, to artisans working at site, to consultants, to our own team. And I think that is perhaps one of the most important things that I feel has, SJK Architects as a practice has developed, which is, one hell of a team. There is, a whole bunch. There's currently 3 people out there who I feel can literally take over this practice, and I'm sure many more will emerge. And I think making room for that has been so wonderful.
Making room for that would mean you stepping back as well, and giving people space to develop and to evolve. And that's something that not many architects do. We want to cling on to the idea of a project and the idea of an ownership, that this is what, this is who I am. We identify so much with what we do that, that's something, it's something that is valuable, because a practice shouldn't end when in one person's lifetime. It should sort of continue. If so many 30 plus years of practice of work has gone into something, it should endure. And you are set, and in that sense, you are setting your practice up for the values and the kind of work that you're doing for it to endure.
So to be completely honest, Khushru, that endurance is very relevant to me. I'm interested in what we're doing right now and what we have been doing, and I think what I love is that others have been able to manifest their own potential, their own aspirations, their own dreams through this practice, and that's extremely relevant and important to me. And we really, and I think that communication, that creation of a team at every level is what's been great fun. Whether it endures or no, pata nahi, I won't be there, or even if I'm there, doesn't matter.
Anupama has this, and this is sort of to both of you. Anupama has this. You've been talking about, Anupama, about this thing about taking time, right? And when I look at your practice and the kind of work that you do, and when I look at Shimul's practice, the kind of work that she does, I have this question: and you say, Anupama says, I am more interested in long-term thinking than short-term action. Not to say that there is no action in actually getting things done, but to put it in perspective. So my question to both of you, in a sense, and there are different questions to each of you, is taking time a privilege? I mean, Anupama, do you maybe, as your kind of practice and the kind of things that you're working on, you have the privilege of taking time, and maybe Shimul, in her kind of practice, doesn't have that kind of privilege, or in general, where there's always a deadline. There's always seems to be that clients are wanting things yesterday. So maybe in two different ways we could sort of address this aspect of taking time.
First of all, I would like to say that really time is not something like a static thing. It is an elastic thing. We all know that. And that it's like people achieve, like if you see that, if you think I'm advocating slowness, which in that sense of delaying, which I am not, I know you're not implying that. I'm not saying taking time as in let's delay things, you know, and I'm not saying let's favor long-term action so that in day-to-day I don't act. It's not like that. I'll try to explain it a little bit from my perspective. I think taking time means to proactively take time, your time. Your time is not something that you're a victim of. It's an attitude to life that every second, if I don't take the time now, every minute we are at a crossroad. Every second, if I act or don't act, but if I don't act, by default, I am supporting the other thing. So this is the spirit in which I'm saying, take your time. I'm saying like, come on, let's not be like, act like victims of, who told us our client gave a deadline? Can't we speak up? Are we victims or what? Can we not say that if I want to do a good job, I need this time. If I don't take the time, I'll be doing wrong things for you and for me. And I don't like, if they still force me, I can say, I don't have to do this job. There are many people who do it double faster than me. But the thing you want and the thing you're wanting from me needs this time, you know, like there are laws, there are universal laws. Like if I'm eager to see my baby, it will still come out after 9 months and it will not come out when I want anyway. So there are universal laws which you have to submit to. And then there are man-made laws, you have to challenge them, especially if they are stupid. And if just because more people are saying it and we make it a culture that we have to ha milao all the time, you know, we know what we are all responsible to create a society if it's not working for us. I just was and you said about privilege, because I was not privileged, I felt, and I would say this for everybody, that if you want to work yourself to a place where you want to be privileged or not like a victim, at least have the privilege to dictate what happens in 24 hours of your day, all the more it is important for you, how you are you present with your mind in deciding what you're doing. Sometimes we have to do jobs. I have had to do that, you know, for your livelihood. If you're walking out of your home, you're nobody's going to pay your bills, yourself. So if you have to do this kind of, you are really in the middle of the life force, you know, your life force will meet the other things around. And every minute you can act, where you submit, those who don't have the privilege, who don't feel free, all the more, I would say, please, for your first vehicle towards it is to take a little time you to think, whether it is when you end of the day, you get up half an hour early, something you can always do to think before you act. And now when I'm saying about long-term goal, what I mean is, I have favored long-term thinking, as in whatever looks urgent and they call for immediate, you don't meet the need for urgency by only urgency. If I see when in Bombay, when there were difficult challenges to solve, or the storm water issue or the whatever issue, wherever, just the solution that is asked is urgent. Will it help if I give the solution in 1 hour? Will I not have to study as much as I need to respond? You don't respond to urgency with urgency. It's stupidity sometimes to just do that, because this is one thing. So I feel long-term action means what? It means being aligned with your goal and your purpose, the goal of that other person's project, and align it with what is your goal with your life. So I need to never forget that purpose. That is my idea to prioritize long-term. I'm not saying that the short-term action must not be in sync. The whole reason to align is so that your every minute actions and decision to not act also will be in perfect alignment. We'll never always be conscious, but within it, if you don't even try, then your life will be just You'll be with the wind blowing here and there. I have seen that. I've faced that. I fought very hard against it. And I'm talking about taking time is because it's the only thing that any person who's alive, everybody, what we have all is a life force. And what we all have 24 hours in a day. Now, what we do with it, how much we live in a way that will prolong our life or not, how we respond and have friends, or which battles we choose to stand up, all that is how you spend your time. And that's what I meant.
Yes, thanks, Anupama. I wanted to sort of take this in a different to another sort of theme, and that is practice as service.
Khushru, just a moment.
Yes, yes, Shimul.
I'd like to respond to that.
Sure,
I love what Anupama said, and I mean, I don't see. I may have a far more mainstream practice than Anupama's, and yet at some level, to me, one of the most important things is the lens through which you view everything, from time to commitment to money to privilege to pressure. And I think most of these things are constructs, and so important to, these are all devils within oneself, more than the devil outside. And I mean, I face it a lot. Every time there's a fear of if I, if I do this, then what? If I say no to this, then what? And I journal, I literally write.
Yeah. Shimul, me too. Look what's on my t-shirt for today. Fear nothing. Fear nothing. Only it's inside you, everything.
Seriously. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things one deals with, just constantly analyzing, assessing one's own demons. And all those demons of pressure, time, money, this is all, stuff one has to deal with internally. I think, and I love what Anupama is talking about, slowness, time, etc. But I'm wired very differently. I want to do, and I'm sitting in this big city, and I want to address all the projects that potentially can come my way. I want to, I want to experiment with building all the time. When I read Anupama's conversation with Sameep, I mean, for me, it was, I was more on Sameep's side of it, which is, I want to build. I can't sit there and, even these self-referential projects. I totally admire Anupama for doing it, and I admire anyone else for doing it, but I'm wired differently.
So, and I also respond. Actually, something I really want to say that if you'll see my closer life, I'm like a real doer, actually, But the thing is that when I went to Auroville, especially, and that is
Anupama, nobody is questioning that.
No, I'm not defensive.
Undoubtedly.
Listen. No, I'm not defending.
Yeah,
I totally appreciate.
No,
in fact, I have a lot of friends who do the other life, so I can have an indirect enjoyment of that, which I originally sought myself. I just want to say, when I landed in a place where I saw that some visions are so big that it's beyond one person's lifetime, and when the people, society around you are, you will all find out all what is going on there, are not allowing, because there is resistance, there is resistance to grand visions from inside and from outside. That is very normal in evolution, that an idea will be met with resistance. The reason why a lot of my things have not also been built, and my spirit there is to hold on, and not to give up and say, chalo, compromise, because I want to see it in my lifetime. It has taken me a great amount of surrender and sacrifice because for me, the building site nurtures me. So the reason my research developed is because I need the site. I need to feed off that, what happens. So I started producing things when my jobs are stuck, and because I'm trying to keep the loyalty to certain things that have been seen and not be bought, into compromising, then I have tried to activate the site, that enjoyment and thrill through that means I had to do lots more work to self-finance, say my ferrocement research line, or to produce other things came out indirectly, because I thought, let me enjoy this site thing through real materials and real scale, and do those type of, let's solve a housing prototype and let's make it that one day when the clients are in a hurry, you have a couple of things to offer which have been solved in the engineering. So I diverted this. It was not my first choice. And I totally enjoy what Samip was saying. And I love to talk, and I have a lot of friends with very big practice. I have not been able to sustain the kind of practice and the things I wanted to do in the context I know many of the things we do will happen maybe even after we are gone, and sometimes you just land up in a role and you're trying to be loyal to that thing and so the nature of, you will see in the book, the type of projects I'm working on, very large urban projects. It will take years and years because there are series of negotiations to be patiently had with all kinds of people. And there are many reasons why I was in support of their topic, Unbuilt. It's not like I don't have built work, but I have taken time out of the built practice to keep holding on to projects which are very, very tempting to give up.
In this, while working on with not really working on the book, but while having this, working a little bit with Rajesh on the book, I had the great experience of chatting with Samira Rathore, and seeing her work, and seeing how much she's done. How much of her practice is devoted to doing things that don't end up in a project, in a built project, the way we look at things. And now it's a pleasure to talk to both of you. I wanted to dwell on aspects of both of your practices and titled it Practice as Service. I wanted to start with Shimul, and you talk about in your little essay in the book, that you like to be you feel that as an architect you want to be an advocate, a participant, and a designer in the work that you do. And you've been working with the BMC schools. I know how challenging that would be, how bureaucratic, how time consuming, but also very rewarding, I'm sure. So could you, Shimul, share a little bit about that journey, what inspired you to sort of put your foot into a door that is not always welcoming, not always easy to work in, and what keeps you inspired to sort of do those kind of projects as well?
So, I also, the BMC school renovation is just one part of it. I think I remember when I came back to India, 34 years ago or whatever, I was trying to teach my Thobi's daughter English, and we were going through some of her textbooks, and I realized that she does not understand a word of what she is being educated, so to say, on. She's simply learning by rote. And I could see how demoralizing it was for her, because she was, mugging things up, and she wasn't growing at any level. And I always thought that really, if one can work with that, with education, particularly at the poorest level of society, that would be a huge contribution that one can make in the world. And it was strange for me that 25 years later, two things happened. One is that my mother-in-law, who started an NGO, she passed away, and her NGO works with BMC schools, and I got completely thrown into, when she passed away very suddenly, I got completely thrown into working on education in BMC schools. So I was working very actively there, and still continue to hold a position in that NGO, where we work on different ways to fill learning gaps for children in municipal corporation schools. But with it, there was this possibility of renovating BMC schools. And I, applied for it, and we went through. It was a tortuous process, but I think if one doesn't engage and participate, how will anything ever happen? So the combination of being able to work with pedagogy and actual built spaces has been wonderful. And a similar thing I find is happening now with gender. I've always been, and I think I profess it quite openly, I've always been very a feminist, and very, very actively so. I taught women's studies at some level while I was at university, and now I've been involved in various, women's resource groups or NGOs, and now at this moment, I've been just pro bono providing a lot of help to the Bombay Municipal Corporation on all their, they have, there are women's hostels, there are daycare centers or creches, there are a bunch of projects that we just keep helping the municipal corporation with. So I think, I think as architects, we're all a bit schizophrenic. We kind of build for the rich and we think for the poor. This was something that Charles Correa had once said in one of his books. So I think it just gives us that opportunity to do some of the things that one, yearns to be able to do.
Anupama, in many senses, your work, large parts of your work are like a service, where you look, whether it's your teaching or whether it's you're working with, trying to, work in a way that craftspeople and tradespeople get more of the money that is involved in constructing a project, or their trades can rejuvenate, can live on in that sense. Do you look at this as a sort of something that you're doing or something that you get from it? What is your relationship to this kind of, to looking at, practice as service?
I see I see very little distance between inner thing and an external thing, between my own where I'm pulled towards things. So I always see a holistic, my life as a holistic thing, within which profession is one thing, aspect of me. My knowledge quest and the knowledge I've acquired is another aspect. Whom I give it to, where I share, where I engage, all of that is one big thing, which is a holistic thing. So because I landed up very early in my life, I landed up in a place where the whole vision of a future city involved land not being owned. Very, very big thing, to create urban design without having plot boundary as a definition. It was a vision that is like, it challenges us, to rethink. And there, the idea was that if the land belongs to the commons and ownership is not a way of, and the way money is distributed, etc., and or generated, or the generation of wealth is not is seen as a separate conceptual thing than my generating my livelihood. Like I was negotiating all these things very early on. So when I started my practice there, and within that context, it was never for commercial interest. And I don't, by the way, let me clarify, I don't judge commercial practice. I'm explaining my context so you understand how I developed in that context. Whether you do today where I am, I have seen people who do, there are categories, what is called service, what is called commercial, but in each of the all categories, whether you have a approach to serve or not, everybody will within it will be doing it in their degree of how much you serve. I think you always do things to serve. You serve yourself and your interest, and sometimes you put someone else's interest first. But I think even that is the one thing only, you know, because actually what draws you is where you give your time and your knowledge. And sometimes something, you have empathy for something, so you want to seek the knowledge to be able to help either them or yourself or whatever it is. You know, so in that spirit, I think one could say, yes, it is. It has been dedicated to a lot of service, and a lot of it I never knew how to quantify what is the value of that when you know, come down to what has to finance what, etc. So many things were naturally done, often exchanged, or I just managed to find a way to keep doing what I feel deeply drawn towards doing. And so it's not like I have any kind of like I'm not. I realized very early on that when my office had 20 people, that thereafter, if I'm going to do jobs just to feed those mouths who are hungry, like a mummy bird coming, and you know, it was not going to be sincere to what my personal capacity was. And I really admire people who run big practice, but I knew up to which level I could engage, what is my strength, and I didn't want to go beyond that. And for bigger scaling of things, I prefer to rely on collaboration. So I felt that if there are many, many more decentralized, very engaged people, and like I've collaborated with many other people, practices, whether they are architectural or not, or craftsman community or whoever. And I think, like, I used to look at the beehive and say, you know, look, how many ever bees are in that colony. Every bee and every bird is still producing its thing. And the rest is organized. The social system gets organized around that. I never really subscribed to the outsourcing to large kind of companies to produce such degrees of standardization that we are alienated from it, and we don't know what we are doing. We don't know the people who work in our office, and I don't judge that, because I know certain projects need that sort of a organization. But for me, it's not something I wanted to do just because it's natural to keep growing. I had the choice to grow naturally that much. I chose not to, because I realized I was being less creative and less an architect and more a manager of other people and their holidays. And I said, no, that's not my thing.
Well said, Anupama. Just read a note that you wrote, and that is, the unbuilt is like a refuge from the built. It has the potential to imagine, to experiment and speculate on possible future solutions freely. As a sort of, you know, what I wanted you to comment on, you know, the value of a book on like this, putting it into perspective of you know, where we are today, and you know, the kinds of things that are really needed in our in practice and in our world today in India.
Yeah, I felt that the challenges of urbanization in India, like I think India can't afford to get its urbanization wrong. And when I was working with Roger for 17 years on that city plan of Auroville, because people could not see the need for it to be a prototype for other cities, there is a romanticization of what is green and how much to sprawl and to have. For me, it is a kind of elitist life of a bunch of people, because I come from Bombay now, so I know what is that privilege to be, and what that was for. And so I felt that if you want to question the real things that have to be solved, that if nobody takes the time to solve it, then it will never get solved. Every 30 years have passed, and the problems that I used to feel in Bombay have become much worse and more fast. And the ugliness is only faster built, and it's built with architects' collaboration and all that. So I wanted to work on other places where it may take really long. It was not that my intention is not to build it. That big project has remained unbuilt, and because nobody wants to give the time to the large thinking which has to be solved in order for smaller things to do an urban project, to make all those various negotiations to clear a plot even is like such a big deal. So for that reason, I felt that I'm ready to dedicate now when the aim is so big, or when the imagination is so grand, that one person's lifetime, Roger Anger, it won't be enough to carry it. And most architects want to think from starting from me, what I see today. And I felt like I like that, what he did up to now, and I like to work it out. And if turns out to be useful, maybe one day when we desperately need it, then at least maybe people will look at it, and then there will be much more detail. In that spirit, I have gone on working on some of the things, and I do hope sincerely that the day will come. I don't see that if you have a very big problem and you work on the small problem, and you make yourself so busy that you try to not see the big problem. It's like horse with blinds, it doesn't, I find it very difficult to unsee what I've seen. So I just chose to do this. It makes me feel better that I'm working on it. That's the way I meant.
It would be really nice to have a conversation and a sharing from you, on the line of goodwill, on the project. It's something that I wanted to touch upon in this conversation, but I think we need a separate,
another time. Yeah.
Another completely separate talk, and maybe Rajesh can organize it and we can.
I'm on. Let's connect on this.
Anupama, thank you.
Thank you.
We should continue this conversation.
Yes.
On this work of yours, and share it with a larger group of people. Shimul, thanks for staying back. There were a series of more thoughts and ideas that I wanted to get your take on, and these three are sort of, I've skipped a couple, but I wanted to talk about the place of architects and your thought of the place of architects in society today. And I'm not talking about the place of architecture. I'm specifically talking about the place of architects. And because we'll come to the place of the profession after this. And there's a quote here from Suhasini Iyer again. And I'm going to read. I quote, "Most architects have become an expendable part of the supply chain, a cog with a limited role, a grudgingly tolerated middleman by the other players who are maximizing value addition with short-term investments in a volatile property market. The architect, perceived by developers and consultants as this glib person who entertains with visuals and hyperbole, an opening act before the big boys take over the stage to herd the project through the labyrinth of politics and economics to bear sufficient fruit within the break-even timeline. In the preliminary meet and greet sessions, clients expound on relevance, sustainability, and aesthetics to lubricate the encounter. Architectural concepts are demanded and provided by us within absurd timelines, even while everyone knows that they are just placeholders to get the political, financial, legal, marketing, and other important ducks in a row." End quote. What's your this in some ways, I agree with this. I see this happening around us. I've had personal experiences like this, with clients. In another way, it seems like a very, cynical and negative, you could say, pessimistic view of our role in society. What are your thoughts, Shimul?
Again, I see that as such a black and white statement, and I think not only are there architects and there are architects, meaning there are different types of human beings that are architects, and therefore each human being holds their own in a different way and to different levels and on different things. I'd love to say that, yeah, there are the architects who completely roll with the vision, the very kind of capitalistic vision of a developer or a set of political thoughts. And there are architects who are able to use that as fodder to change the vision and develop a more sustainable or use that to concretize their own aspirations or better aspirations. And all of this varies in degree. But I think one of the things that I've been constantly learning from people like Anupama, um, you know, or to yeah, there are a few other such practices, is that creating, looking at problems in society and looking at how you can solve them, and then approaching all the powers that be to solve them. So actually creating your own projects is a very, very powerful methodology. And I find, we had several conversations with Bimal Patel, and whereas, I do not admire some of the things he's doing, I definitely admire the influence that he's able to have at very, very large levels, by simply taking what he thinks is important, powerful, and making it happen. Yeah, I mean, how it happens then, and um, we all have different dilemmas with how he's approaching certain things, but that was something important I learned from him. As Anupama talked about, just taking the time to think through issues and then finding ways to solve them, and not solving them with the belief that you have to toe certain lines, play that middleman, or have a limited amount of time or options. So I think I just go back to that. The demons are inside us.
Yeah. In that sense, what you're getting to is this proactive approach of, you see a problem, you see an opportunity to contribute, and you actually just go in there and do it. And that sort of takes me to the next point of, the place of the profession where we find ourselves, as a profession, and the modes of engagement that we can have as both architects and as a broader field. Is it, we talk about architects trying to solve, there seems to be so much of a responsibility put on us. We are supposed to solve climate issues, we're supposed to solve socio-economic issues, we're supposed to solve inequity issues, social justice issues. Is this too much to expect from the profession, or is it something that we can, in our own ways, maybe in small ways, address?
It's too much and it's too little. I think every human being needs to have the social consciousness to address issues, societal issues. But I think every act or every decision you make, every choice you make, again, something that Anupama referred to, at some level, which is that every choice you make has a repercussion. And so it's simply, as human beings, making those choices responsibly, taking the time, as she talked about, to make those choices, holding one's own each time you make a choice. I think these are the things. So whether it's with a little interior that you do, or somebody's toilet, or the design of a city, I think there's an equal amount of responsibility or joy. I prefer the word joy to responsibility in solving that problem with holding one's own, holding certain values dear to yourself, holding an aesthetic, holding, holding everything that you've learned, putting all of that into the solution of a single door, a single toilet to a city.
It's impossible to talk about the unbuilt without, referencing the built. I wanted to talk about the relationship between climate change, architecture, and India. And, there are some countries, Australia, UK, US, have signed, the architects of these countries have signed this thing called Architects Declare, where they say they're going to do only certain types of projects. They're only going to do they will build in a particular way. They will not do certain types of projects. And it's a whole manifesto in a sense. So I wanted to sort of discuss, do you think something like this is even valid in India, where we are a country which is still growing, it still has huge needs, both in terms of infrastructure, in terms of industrialization, in terms of housing, in terms of education campuses which are needed, and so that's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is how does this elephant in the room, climate change, how has it affected you? Has it affected you personally? How have you looked at this in your practice? How do you address it in your practice? So these are sort of two different questions.
I see climate change as a very fundamental sign of a society or a globe that believes it can control itself, that we can control the environment, we can control each other. I see it as a huge kind of control mechanism that needs to be re-understood. And I think if we can, for instance, just sitting out here in this balcony, allowing that breeze to come through, it's the first step in recognizing that without conditioned, controlled air, you can survive. And you can survive rather well. You don't have to be in an air-conditioned room all the time. You don't have to keep those insects away all the time. There's simpler ways of working with nature that would allow for much less consumption of resources. So when we control, we're also consuming resources in a huge way. So I think that mindset of control, consumption, if that at a very deep philosophical level can be addressed and dealt with, we can then deal with designing several of our projects for the longest time never used air conditioning at all. And we found that we couldn't even apply for LEEDs green building or LEEDs anything, because if you didn't have air conditioning, LEEDs didn't even consider it. You've got to have a very elaborate air conditioning system that saves energy for LEEDs to give you points. They won't give you those 30 points. You don't have air conditioning. So there's a lot of dramabazi that goes on with all these manifestos and charters. LEEDs sounds like it's fabulous, but it's a game. It's a snakes and ladders game. And you can make it look damn good even when it's not. Every developer that's building, completely air-conditioned, controlled environments and using every form of carbon energy that's excessive is still getting a LEEDs diamond rating. So I think there's a much more philosophical level at which one needs to address it. And there are some projects on which if you take the resorts, Khushru, it's like just the act of a hospitality project where somebody rents a room and likes to have an air-conditioned space. How do you deal with that? So in many ways, the way we deal with that is we allow all the public spaces to be very, very shaded, open air, all the corridors, try and open things up as much as possible, use natural materials, ensure the wind comes through, ensure that there's a lot of insulation so that even if you use air conditioning in that room, a very small amount is going, the amount of energy you use is less. And then just try and use local resources as much as possible. So like you rightly have, you've done your research and that those clay tiles was such an important feature for us, because we wanted to use brick everywhere, and we did use brick, but we finally found that brick had certain issues that we couldn't circumvent. So when we could, we used the clay tiles, which, I mean, it's amazing. 26 villages worked on those tiles, and they're made literally by, on a potter's wheel, and then they get chopped in the middle. I thought it was such a simple, beautiful craft. And it felt wonderful to be able to use it. So yeah, you win some, you lose some. It's not I find that any viewing of the world as a binary, as a win or a lose, or a good or a bad, is highly problematic. Everything is like, life is in the grays.
Well said. On that note, I think this has been a really fascinating conversation with both of you. On that sort of optimistic note, and on this note of, Shimul, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. And thanks to Anupama as well. I'm sure she'll hear the rest of this conversation. And Rajesh, I'd like to personally thank you for, putting this whole effort. It's a mammoth effort together, There's so many people from all over the country putting in their time, efforts, and for you to orchestrate it like this, like this magician putting everybody together is really remarkable. And the patience and dedication you've shown to doing this, and getting it done is remarkable. So thanks, Rajesh, because I think that it has forced me to reflect on so many things. My conversation with Samira, my conversation with Shimul and with Anupama, as well as the little, other stuff that has gone into this book. But thanks, Rajesh. Thank you, Shimul, and we will again meet up soon.
So Khushru, thank you. Thanks for doing all your research the way you did. So that was a highly informed conversation. And Rajesh, I did go through several of the essays. I think you've got some really bright minds speaking up, and it's rare to find so many stimulating conversations all in one book, and so diverse. So great job. Thanks so much, and thanks for having me on this conversation.